What's up, boys and girls? It's Saturday morning. I've just been studying the Hong Kong Book of Kung Fu, getting ready for today's morning of the Saturday Morning Review. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Jazwares Hanna-Barbera Hong Kong Phooey figure. And, as a special treat, we're going to be diving back into my childhood again, taking a look at a figure I never had in the past, the Princess of Power Kowl figure. So sit right back. Hong Kong Phooey chopped his way to Saturday morning audiences on September 7th, 1974. Aided by his Hong Kong Book of Kung Fu, the world's #1 super guy often makes a mess of situations, leaving them to be cleaned up anonymously by the snickering sidekick Spot, allowing Hong Kong to take the credit. Today, we take a look at the Jazwares Hong Kong Phooey action figure. Alright everybody, here we have our Hong Kong Phooey 6-inch scale Hanna-Barbera figure. And much like with the 3-inch Hanna-Barbera figures, he comes in a very similar Hanna-Barbera blister card pack. It does have the exact same cast of characters and figure franchises on the back, although the package is obviously much larger. And just like with the previous figures, I've gone ahead and pre-cut the bubble to remove the tray from the card, so we can take a look at our Hong Kong Phooey figure. And you'll notice, just like with all of the other Hanna-Barbera figures, he has no ties keeping him in the tray, so we can pop him right out. Along with our sidekick Spot. Okay, so here we have our Hong Kong Phooey figure, and he is obviously much larger in scale compared to any of the other Hanna-Barbera figures that we've reviewed in this line. He has got paint application on his ears, on his nose and mask, and then on his robe. Otherwise, he is completely bare plastic. So let's take a look at the articulation. His hands twist at the wrist. And we've got one hand that is molded in that classic Hong Kong punch. We've got up and down movement at the elbows. And then we've got up and down and pivoting movement at the shoulders. You'll notice that we've got a waist split here, but it is kind of gummy, so you'll have to break them free. And then we've got rotation at the neck, and then we've got up and down movement at the ankles. And we've actually got a knee joint on this figure, so he moves at the knees. And if you look underneath of his gi here, you can actually see that he's got articulation at the hips too. So, this is the Hong Kong Phooey figure. Now, instead of being packaged with an accessory like any of the 3-inch figures, this figure actually comes packaged with his sidekick Spot. Now, this figure has absolutely no articulation whatsoever. He is just a solid sculpted figure. He has got paint application on his stripes and on his face. Otherwise, he is all this molded bare yellow plastic. And he looks pretty cool. Alright, so that's probably going to do it for our look at the Hanna-Barbera Hong Kong Phooey and Spot. Not a whole lot to them, but they are pretty cool. Alright everybody, so what did you think? This is a situation where I really don't know how I feel about this figure. I love the character, and I love the idea of a figure based on this character. I just don't know how I feel about the scale in contrast to the other figures in the line. Now, I also don't know what qualifies Dino as a secondary character to be a figure on his own, as opposed to being a figure pack-in, much like Spot is with Hong Kong Phooey. Now, that is going to about wrap it up for the Hanna-Barbera products on the Saturday Morning Review. There are still a few new Jazwares figures out there, and of course once I get them, I'm sure they will go under the camera. And there are many other Hanna-Barbera figures out there that I would love to review. So as they come into my collection, look forward to seeing those products. and we're going to move on to the second review. As promised, we're going to be taking a look at the Princess of Power Kowl figure, a figure I never had whenever I was a kid, and it is going to be the second out of a permanent installment on the Saturday morning review that I'm just going to call Toys I Never Had When I Was a Kid. Toys that I always wanted but just never had. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be that long. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it, toys that I did have whenever I was a kid and you didn't, so you suck. Whatever. Anyway, sit right back and we're going to take a look at the Princess of Power Kowl figure. Much like many of the Princess of Power characters, Kowl made his screen debut to theatrical audiences in the animated feature The Secret of the Sword. Always there to offer his opinion, he really is a know-it-all owl. Today we're going to take a look at the vintage Mattel Princess of Power Kowl figure. Alright guys, here we have this nice little vintage treasure. I just recently added him to my collection after searching for him and avoiding many high prices. He is kind of a little dingy on his flocking, as you can see, but he is still in really nice shape and has his tummy. So, this figure is actually in scale to the Masters of the Universe vintage Orko figure. If you put them side by side, they are very similar in scale, and I would actually have mine here to share with you, except he is in a restoration process right now and I'm currently repainting him. So, the Kowl figure features this kind of pale tan flocking over most of the entire figure. The entire backside of the figure and his entire body on the front is entirely flocked. The only thing that's not is his face and the insides of his ears. So we've got this kind of more like a yellow-brown color on his hands. Mine's a little faded. It was probably much darker and closer to orange whenever he was fresh out of the package, but nonetheless, it's still there. Okay. So the figure features articulation at the head, so you can rotate his head, but because of the way his ears are molded, you can't really rotate them around too much. It pretty much just goes there, and that's where it stops. He also has articulation at the shoulder, so you can move his hands up and down, but that is all you get, except, for whatever reason, the tip of his tail has articulation, so you can spin his tail. Now, this figure does come with an action feature to some extent. I believe this was probably used to show off his know-it-all ability, and maybe he could choose a color or something, I don't know, but if you flip his tummy plate, you can actually see there's this little colored square here, and each time you flip it, it changes color. Now, I will note that you want to be extremely careful when flipping this piece, because the very first day I had mine, I flipped it, and I flipped the piece right off of his tummy, and I actually thought that I had broken him. So, it looks like you get a blue, a red, a yellow, and a green color square by lifting up this action feature. And then in addition to this, the figure was also packaged with a classic Princess of Power mini comic. But other than that, that's pretty much it for this vintage Princess of Power treasure. Alright boys and girls, so what did you think? Growing up, I didn't have a Kowl figure. To be completely honest, I didn't even know this little guy existed. It wasn't until I became a teen collector and was actually able to do the research and figure out what figures came out in each line that I was able to add this guy to my collection. And now he's there to stay. So as I stated before, we're going to be moving away from the Hanna-Barbera product here a little bit at Saturday Morning Review. There are still a few Jazwares figures out there and many past Hanna-Barbera collectibles that I want to add to my collection, and I'm sure once I do, they'll go under the camera. But until then, we've got many good things in store. You will all want to be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode, as we have a very special birthday celebration. As many of you know, this month marks the 30th anniversary of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And in honor of that, we're going to be throwing on our birthday party hats and taking a look at the original He-Man and Skeletor figures. And for our special Never Had as a Kid segment, we're going to be taking a look at the vintage Squeeze. So be sure to stay tuned and check that out. If you like what we do here at the Pop Culture Network, be sure to check out our other shows such as It Figures and the VG Losers podcast. And also check out our forums at jointheforums.com and check out our store at shoppcn.com. Until then, I'm your host, Intern Rick, and take care.